Now, before we get started, we thought it was important just to take a couple of moments to consider some of the benefits when we think about learning outdoors. So, I'd like you just to take a moment and consider this, and you can note down some of the ideas and reasons that you think that there are benefits for taking learning outdoors, and you might want to post some of these into the chat. So, I'll pop it myself on mute and just give you a little moment there to consider that. No, that's great. Somebody's posted health and well-being. I'm not sure if you mean links to the health and wellbeing curriculum or just kind of good for health and wellbeing in general, but thank you for posting that in there. Anybody else brave enough to share some ideas, some of the benefits around taking learning outdoors? We've got engagement, increased motivation, making it relevant, making it active. It's healthy, it's fun, it's challenging, can provide a calmer learning environment for many, that it's more accessible, health and wellbeing in general, fresh air, play. That's great. Thank you. Lots of ideas coming there. Connection to nature, good for physical and mental health. Great, thank you for those. And as we go through tonight's session, hopefully you'll be able to keep adding to the list. And by the end of this part of the presentation, you'll have some ideas that you can take and you can use and adapt with your own classes across your own settings as you are thinking about numeracy and maths learning outdoors. Now, we know when we think about back to our kind of own school experiences, outdoor learning experiences are often the ones that kind of stick with learners. They're remembered for a lifetime. You might have memories yourself of school trips or school camp or outdoor lessons that took place during your own school experiences. And as people mentioned there in the chat, learning outdoors can be enjoyable, it can be creative, it can be challenging, it can be adventurous, and it helps children and young people learn by experience, grow confident and responsible citizens who value and appreciate the landscapes, the natural heritage, and the culture of Scotland. We know that outdoor learning offers many opportunities for learners to deepen and contextualise their understanding within the different curriculum areas, and for linking learning across the curriculum in different contexts at all levels. So today we are going to be focusing on taking numeracy and maths outdoors and the benefits that this can have. But at the end of the presentation, there will be links for you to explore learning outdoors a bit further. The documents on screen were both published quite far apart. The first was in 2010 and the second one was in February this year, but both of them highlight the importance of providing outdoor learning experiences. And although the first document was published in 2010, the messages are still really valid. It's easy to follow, and if you would like to kind of have an introduction to beginning to learn outdoors, then that one is probably the best place to start. The second document is a thematic review of what makes successful approaches to learning outdoors and provides a range of case studies. And although we're focusing on taking maths outdoors, it is useful to see the wider context, and also some further links are provided at the end of the presentation tonight. Now, I don't know, Maria, if we can add the chat because Jacqueline's not here. Let me just double check if it's in the chat. I don't think so. So you can maybe just type into the chat, how often do you explicitly plan outdoor learning opportunities for numeracy and maths. So not just kind of that ad hoc, let's go outside, but actually have it planned ahead that at this point we'll go outdoors. So how often would you say that you do that? I'll give you a moment just to post that into your answers into the chat. Infrequently, not very often. Used to be weekly, but ran out of ideas. An hour a week, twice this term. So quite a difference across people on the call, almost days there. Occasionally, an area of improvement. During maths week, outdoor learning is a big focus in the school improvement plan. So again, it varies across settings. That kind of, some schools and settings will have an expectation. So don't worry, yep, hardly. And hopefully by the end of today's session, if you are somebody that's kind of at the lower end of these planned opportunities, hopefully by the end of tonight, you will have some ideas of how you can begin to incorporate that. And I know, myself, I was sometimes guilty of kind of looking outside and thinking, oh, it's really nice today, let's go outside. And, I would pack up my classroom and I would take my class out for Milk and Story or to finish off writing. This type of activity is enjoyable, but it hasn't been planned for. And so that type of thing where you're just kind of going outside isn't the type of outdoor learning that we're going to be discussing tonight. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on how you can explicitly plan to use the natural outdoor environment to enrich numeracy and maths lessons. So in order to do this, we do need to plan ahead for outdoor learning opportunities to consider the skills and the learning experiences that we're hoping to develop during the lesson. Taking the time to consider actually what is in the outdoor setting and environment around us and how can that support us to deliver the planned learning. Now, before we look at taking maths outdoors specifically, it is useful to look at a couple of generic outdoor learning points. And one of the things that you need to consider is how will you make the outdoor space work for you and work for your learners? And, the outdoors looks very different to your indoor classroom and indoor settings. So you need to think about actually what are the routines and what are the expectations that you're going to need to have in place in order for it to work successfully for you. So the graphic on the screen comes from the Scottish Advisory Panel for Outdoor Education and the Learning Outdoors support team from East Ayrshire. It gives some really useful tips on learning outdoors. So if you're quite nervous about taking learners outdoors, you could begin by, as they suggest, bringing some of the outdoors into your classroom. So this might be through adding in natural materials like leaves and sticks and shells, stones, or anything else that you feel is appropriate. And there's lots of good points on the graphic, which I'll give you just a moment to read through. And as we go through the presentation tonight, we're also going to address some of these points. Now, the tips on this page come from an article that is written by Bob Bush, and he wrote this when schools were beginning to return after the first lockdown. In his article, he discusses the benefits of learning outdoors, but it also has lots of really useful links included in it, and it's definitely worth a read. And now we're going to have a look at some of the different ways that you can now go on to consider planning for numeracy and maths learning experiences. And this is one question that we're often asked, kind of how do you get started? And what we would always say is it's a good idea to start small if you are new to learning outdoors. And I see that from the chat, quite a lot of people, this is something that maybe is quite new to you. So one good tip is to begin with activities that require no or very little resources, because this is then going to help you gain confidence in taking learners outdoors. If you try to become too ambitious at the beginning, then it is most likely going to put you off ever going back outdoors again. So starting small and building up your confidence as well as the learner's confidence outside. As the previous slide said, it's really important to establish clear ground rules with your class. And it's really important that keyword is with your class. So establishing maybe a main meeting point, discussing the reasonable boundaries with the learners. And then if your learners have been involved in the planning and decision making, then they're more likely to be respectful of these decisions. It's also a good idea to have something that highlights where the actual perimeter boundaries are. So you might use marker cones or ribbons around a particular area. And obviously how you do that will depend on what your outdoor area looks like or where you're working and the resources that you've got access to. It's also a good idea to agree a way of gaining learners' attention so that learners know when it's time to stop and come back to the main gathering point. So it might be that you have something like you shake bells or you beat a drum, but really anything that saves you from having to shout up and down the playground or across the park. You want to have that signal that's saving your vocal cords. And this one might seem really obvious, but the clothing that you wear is really important. So when we were chatting about this presentation, Jacqueline was saying that she used to keep a spare pair of wellies and a waterproof in the cupboard in school. If you're able to do that, it just makes things easier, because one of the things is that when you plan ahead, you obviously don't know what the weather is. So, as they say, there's no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing. The other thing that might be useful for you to consider is creating some sort of outdoor box or an outdoor bag. So some schools, they have started to make these up, so it's worth checking to see if that is the kind of thing that your school already has. And that way it makes it easier because you're able just to kind of pick up the box and take the learning outdoors. And we're going to look at a few more examples of what you might put in your box on the next slide. And later in the session, we'll explore some of the resources that you actually might be able to collect and create for free or for very little cost, so that you're not having to actually, buy things to put in your outdoor. So here are some of the things that can make taking learning outdoors a little bit easier, whether it's maths or any other area of the curriculum that you're taking outside. So we've pulled together a list of some of the things that might be useful to keep inside of the box. You don't have to have all of these, it's not an exhaustive list, and it might actually be that you've got other resources that you're going to find useful. In the last school that I was in, we shared a box across a couple of classrooms just to kind of keep that cost down. And it's also important to make sure that you are replenishing the items such as the chalk and the paper. If you've got any other ideas of things that you know might be useful to put in that box, feel free to pop those into the chat. Now, access to green spaces can be limited depending on where your school is set. And so it can be a good idea to collect your own sets of materials that can be used indoors and outdoors. So you might have things like leaves or stones that you've collected yourself. These kind of things are staple resources that can be used in lots of different ways, and we'll show you some examples of how you might use these as we move on today. Maria, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm just going to stop sharing just for 1 minute because I think there's a setting that's moving on these slides automatically.
Okay, I'll just talk through this slide just now, Yvonne, and then we can bring the slides back up when you're ready. So just to recap a wee bit on some of the points in that overview that Yvonne provided there, and also really heartened by some of the comments in the chat about those real benefits of taking the learning outdoors, because we know that the outdoor environment can provide real rich mathematical opportunities, provide opportunities for learners to apply the creativity and imagination, which we know is really important, as they take the knowledge that they've already got from the classroom and apply that in a real world setting. The unique opportunities that they can gain using an outdoor space can really help our learners learn through that direct experience, which can add value to any teaching and learning that's maybe done in the classroom. What we hope is that it leads then to a development of a deeper understanding of some of the concepts, which might seem quite abstract at times, but through that practical application, the learners begin to make sense. However, as Yvonne alluded to, it takes planning, it takes careful planning and consideration, because what we want to make sure is that the numeracy in math learning is explicit. The activities that we provide need to support and challenge where it's needed the most. And you will know your learners best to know where that support and challenge is needed. The slide that's on screen just now and the reflective questions that are posed there and some of those considerations would be a focal point for you to revisit and come back to. You might want to do that individually, but it's even better if you can do that through some sort of collaboration at school or wider, just to identify for yourself any areas of strength, but also, you know, those areas that you might need further development. And it's much easier if you can do that through discussion and sharing. So this is a slide that I would say to come back to in your own time, especially as you mentioned in the chat that this is an area of further development for some of you. Next slide, Yvonne, if you're okay. So this one was a bit of a surprise to me because it was, who knew the sticks were so versatile? But it's just to use one example of demonstrating how something like sticks can be used in the context of measure, but in a really progressive way. So for example, at early level, you might begin by thinking about that comparison and using that language of longer or shorter and comparing a collection of sticks or comparing it to the length of your hand or your foot. So it's really a good way of developing the understanding of that language in a really practical way. But it might then progress on to finding a stick which is maybe a metre or half a metre, because learners need to see what that metre looks like, and they can do that through handling and using these images as a stimulus. The slide will show other ways how this can be developed further as learners start to move through the levels. And not only do these types of activities encourage estimation, which is a skill that needs developing and doesn't always get the place that it deserves, but also these activities can also help develop problem solving skills, which if you came to our input recently, you'll know that we talk a lot about how problem solving skills need to permeate across learning. So just take a minute just to scan over these. Again, this is a presentation that you can return to. So again, if you're looking for ideas, we were hoping to put as many ideas in here just so that you can revisit them, and you'll get all the materials as always after the session. Okay, so again, this was a slide put together from Jacqueline. Jacqueline attended a session last year and it was delivered by Juliet Robertson. If you're not familiar with Juliet Robertson, who's a bit of a guru, I have to say, with everything outdoor learning, not just numeracy and math specific, I would encourage that you go and maybe have a look at some of Juliet Robertson's work. And again, I don't know if you can do that, Yvonne, but I can certainly put a link into some of her stuff that's online. So Jacqueline pulled out some of the learning that she thought was really useful from that webinar that she attended. And I'm going to just talk about a couple of them in this slide. So each learner could have their own pocket rope, and that pocket rope might measure exactly 1 metre. Of course, the ropes can be used for measurement work, but we can also use them for things like empty number lines if we don't already have that, and maybe chalked out or printed onto our playgrounds. We could, as the learners progressed, we could have the ropes being marked in 10 centimetre markings, and we could use colour tape just to indicate those 10 centimetre markings. It's worth having a wee look about, and we become really good at this as teachers, looking in hardware shops or any shops with just bits and pieces that we can maybe pick up some nylon braiding or things like old tablecloths and things that actually we don't see as tablecloths, we see as a learning opportunity. So it's worth having a wee browse about hardware shops to pick up some of this stuff, hopefully quite reasonably. Juliet at that session also demonstrated using a large sheet, so the non-fitted sheets, maybe an old tablecloth, an old curtain, and using that to draw out a 10 by 10 grid. Again, that could be useful if you don't have access to one in your playground, but it's really easy just to throw that in a box, fold it up and bring that out as and when you need it. On a similar note, she recommended pocket 10 frames, and again using old light coloured material and a permanent mark just to make up those 10 frames which each learner could have, or each group of learners could have. Again, another alternative to the 10 frames might be egg boxes which store 10 eggs, and you'll see an image of that on the slide just now. They can be used as portable 10 frames for collecting items, as you can see on the slide. Really good because they are stackable, they're really easy to store, and they're really easy transported as well. They're dead light. So it's a really good way of the learners being able to visualise what 10 looks like or what the combinations of 10 look like. And over the next few slides, just moving on, we're going to look at some practical ideas that you might want to use in your own environment, because we know that that's what helps, just getting some ideas as a bit of a starter for 10. Some of these ideas will be appealing to you, others you might want to just pick and choose depending on where you are and where your learners are at. But it's, as Yvonne said, start with something that you feel comfortable with, something that will help build your confidence. And if there is anything that you've seen or that you've used, and I see somebody's put in the chat there about a 10 frame stamp, very good. If there's any other ideas, please post them in the chat so that other people can pick up on your ideas as well. So learning outdoors and using those real contexts through that hands-on experiential learning doesn't only heighten the engagement levels, but also promotes making connections between different areas of learning. Learners really need that experience of manipulating material, real-life materials to enable and enhance that mathematical thinking. So we're going to start in this slide by looking at early level. Not going to go over all of them because we don't have time, but again, have a look through this in your own time, and I'll go through a couple with you just now, just so that I'm sort of drawing attention to the ones that I think are most important, or ones that, you know, I've used in the past myself. Again, use them as ideas, but tailor them to suit your learners. We always say that, so no difference here. So a really simple activity that you could be using at early level is a kind of find the number sort of treasure hunt type thing. So learners could be hunting for the numbers that they see in their local environment, maybe on door numbers or street signs, or you could actually hide the numerals in designated areas around your outdoor space and ask the learners to find them. I would add in here that maybe when your learners are ready, maybe to have multiple representations of the numeral. So again, we've spoke about this in past sessions, maybe having the number name, maybe having tally marks or dot or domino patterns, just so that we are making sure the learners are seeing that number in lots of different ways. So you can bury the numerals in sand or mud and have a bit of a treasure hunt. Again, this activity could be extended into finding two numbers and asking the learners what the total is or what they know about these numbers. You know, it's all those questions that really just help deepen that understanding. Learners like a wee bit of a competition, so maybe turn it into a wee bit of a competition. So what pairs of learners can find the highest total? And again, coming up with those questions that just keep that engagement level quite high. Again, asking questions like, if 6 is the answer, what might be the question? How many different ways can you make 6? And again, as you go further up the school, you might want to use a very similar activity, but maybe be asking things like, who can find me a factor of 18? Who can find me a multiple of 10? So a lot of the ideas that we're going to share at early level can absolutely be extended quite easily as we go through the levels. Another simple activity could be gathering and collecting outdoor natural materials, or using paintbrushes and water to draw or make the numerals on the ground. And asking others, what numeral have I made? And what comes before and after that number? What do you know about this number? Just all those types of questions, again, just to deepen that understanding. You can see here we've used that 10 egg box in the number section. And in this, the learners have collected the items. And those questions that we use all the time, I wonder how many we have. How do you know? I wonder how many more we would need to make 10. How do you know? All these types of questions, just really getting the learners to think a bit deeper. And again, extending those types of questions as the learners progress to addition and subtraction. So Tom has found 5 stones, Sally has found 5, Sally has found 2. How many do they have altogether? What's the difference between the number of stones that Tom and Sally have found? And again, the 10 frames can be really useful for this, as they provide that visual representation to support their thinking. You might want to draw them, but you might also want to use that pocket 10 frame that I explained earlier on, or indeed the 10 egg box to collect the items. At the top, you can see a number line that's been drawn in chalk. And again, just a wee bit of a note here, it's important to provide a variety of both vertical and horizontal number lines, as this applies all the way through the levels. And sometimes you might be lucky that you can use your playground lines or length of string and use them as number lines if you don't have chalk to hand. The last one I'm going to talk about in this slide in a wee bit more detail is patterns. It's important to note that these don't just have to be patterns with physical materials. We can also be thinking about moving patterns such as hopping, skipping and jumping, etc. And having the flexibility of being outdoors gives you that more space than indoors to allow for these types of activities. And it also shows learners that those patterns don't always have to be visual. You can, of course, create lots of fantastic visual patterns using items collected outdoors, though. And think about patterns they might see in the wider environment. Can they describe the patterns? Can they draw it? Can they continue it? And just in the next slide, there's just another few ideas for early level. And the ideas within the number collections box could also be extended as learners progress. So, for example, it's great that we found 5 leaves. I wonder what would happen if we found 2 more. Who has collected the most stones? How do we know? So we're always looking for providing opportunities for learners to justify and to reason. And you can see from some of these ideas that problem solving runs absolutely alongside. And using those questions that I mentioned earlier, I wonder, these types of questions can really support learners to develop those problem solving skills that we spoke so much about in the last session. You can see in this slide there's a section on addition, and again what I would say there is if you're using it for addition, make sure the links between addition and subtraction are explored too, so that the learners can really see those links quite explicitly. And again, using the 10 frames or using partitioning can allow for those links to be noticed. You can see an example at the very top of how to demonstrate partitioning using a cherry drawn diagram. So in this example, the learner has collected 5 stones and has partitioned them in this case into a 3 and a 2. Again, asking those I wonder questions. I wonder if there are any other ways that we can make 5, and just allowing the learner to revisit that. Cherry diagrams can also be used throughout the levels when we're thinking about more kind of complex partitioning, but there's no harm in starting that at early level. And you might start with the concrete material such as leaves or stones, move that on and progress on to kind of dots or numerals when you think the learners are ready. And in the data handling activity, which is the last one I'll talk about on this slide, it's really important to provide opportunities for learners to make decisions about what they want to collect, how they want to sort the items they have collected. And try again, we're going back to planning here, the importance of planning. Try to plan for and provide ample opportunities for the learners to take risks, for them to problem solve and to make those calculated decisions for themselves. You might need to provide some support for some learners, but it's worthwhile taking that wee step back. And I know sometimes I find that quite difficult, but take a wee step back, allow them the opportunity to make the decisions where possible, because then they're really invested and they're really engaged. And that's sometimes where that learning is retained and it sticks. So we're going to move on to look at first level, and I know I'm going through these quite quickly, but as I said, you will get access to the slides and you can look at them in more detail. But you'll see when we start moving through the levels and in the next couple of slides that some of the activities are just that natural progression from what I explained there at early level. I'm not going to read through all of these either, but again, revisit these is what I would recommend. And you'll see here how we've used the cherry diagrams again and how that's been extended into first level. So the numbers can be partitioned in lots of different ways, and that's what we would really be promoting. So when we're thinking about 75, it's not just partitioning into 10s and 1s into 70 and 5. We're looking at partitioning into 60 and 10 and 5, or 50 and 20 and 5, and lots of different ways. Learners should be asked to find the different ways of partitioning the numbers, and then again it gives them that ownership. There's another point here that I wanted to make, and I sort of touched on it in the last slide, and that's about using the opportunities when we've got the learners in this outdoor environment with the physical representations, is about making the links between the different operations. So we can see here that we're looking at 4 multiplied by 5. We want to deepen that understanding. We want to quiz the learners and push them a little bit to tell us what else they know. And can they then tell us all the different permeations? Can they think about quarters and fifths? And can they think about division? Really extending that thinking. And how can they show that using the materials that they've collected? That question, what else do you know? It's a $1 million question that we need to hold on to, because that's the one that will get the learners to go back and rethink. It just encourages them to dig deeper a little bit. And again, if it doesn't work the first time you try it, have a go at it again. It's worth having a go at it and modelling it perhaps, but definitely revisiting that. Okay, just moving on. So again, just another couple of examples here for first level. And the activity that's shown down in the bottom left shows items that have been collected and displayed in a Karo diagram. The learners have created the diagram using sticks, but you might need to provide a wee bit of a template to begin with if they're not too sure and they're not too confident with Carroll diagrams. And you can do this quite simply by using chalk to draw them, or again, drawing and using that old sheet that I spoke about, or that tablecloth, and just drawing it out on the back of one of these, and just using that material as much as you possibly can for lots of different reasons. You might want to use hula hoops or chalk, again, to create Venn diagrams to show how items have been sorted and collected. For measurement, we gave you some ideas earlier on about how the sticks could be used, but you could also find items and weigh them if you're able to take some scales outside and think about the development of the language of heavier and lighter. So which is heavier? Is it 10 sticks or is it 10 stones? And how do you know? How could we check? What might make the difference to this answer? Really thinking about those problem solving skills. Do bigger or smaller sticks and stones make a difference? So really getting the learners to think through that investigation. And here again, you can see how problem solving is developed very naturally when learning is taken outdoors. The angles one is an interesting one because learners will soon realise that a lot of the right angled items they find are man-made. And learners can then think about making their own right angle testers with the corners of card and maybe test this to see if the angle is a right angle or not. Again, it's the discussion part of it that's really rich with some of these activities. You can get some really good discussions going. It also gives you an idea of where the learners are and their understanding, which again helps you to plan effective next steps. So just going to move on to second level. And what we're seeing here in the images is at second level, when we're thinking about symmetry, the symmetrical pictures should extend into multiple lines of symmetry. And learners can begin to create images using, again, chalk or maybe different items that they've found. One child can maybe create the image and the partner could create the symmetrical image, so they're working in partnership with each other. In shape, you could look at 3D objects within the natural environment and draw some nets on the ground. And being outdoors gives you that greater flexibility, that greater space to engage in this type of activity. You might also want to think about composite shapes and think about using sticks and the natural environment, natural materials that you might find in the environment, and using them to find the area or the perimeter. Fibonacci is introduced at second level, and again, it's about what does that really mean? It's quite abstract. Can we start to bring that to life by looking at examples in the environment? There is a link on this slide to a video that could be used, and again, it might be quite useful to watch that before you go out to give the learners that wee bit of a base understanding and then take the learning outdoors to extend and deepen that thinking. Of course, we've said before that the outdoor environment provides lots of opportunities for measuring and the real benefits of taking that learning outside. It's really important to emphasise that estimation that I mentioned earlier on. When you're thinking about measure, bring in an element of estimation before you carry out the activities with measure, whether that's measuring distance or measuring durations of time. Really important skill that we need to take every opportunity to develop. A nice activity that we were talking about when we were putting this activity together was where pupils were using small syringes to collect water and they were measuring the puddles within the playground. What they had to estimate beforehand was which puddles they thought held the most water. And the results were quite surprising because what they had considered was maybe how wide the puddles were, but maybe not how deep. So again, it's about some of those misconceptions that we can try to unpick. Again, estimation permeating across these activities, problem-solving skills being developed quite naturally. And again, I know I'm repeating that, but I'm repeating it quite deliberately. On the next slide, just to continue a wee bit more with second level, decimals and measure can also be linked together, as learners could make use of metre sticks to draw lines and mark the decimal fractions on them. They could also make links between the fractions, the decimal fractions and percentages, but again in a very visual way. On the top left picture, the learner has created a number line that shows the links between some basic fractions and the decimal and percentage equivalents. That's the type of learning that we want, really making those links. And at second level, learners can progress to drawing or measuring acute, obtuse, straight and reflex angles too. They might want to create pictures, again using sticks or chalk, and mark the different types of angles on. And again, for those learners who maybe needing a wee bit extra challenge, you might want to ask them to create a picture that has at least a certain number of each type of angle, just to get them to revisit and rethink. And some of those natural items and the chalk can be used to create algebraic equations. And here what we've used is leaves, but you can use anything that you can get your hands on. So pine cones, stones, just whatever you've got access to in your own outdoor environment. And at second level, negative numbers are introduced, but we're only introducing at this stage a bit of an awareness of them. But what better way to do that than in an outdoor environment? They can plot them in empty number lines. And again, reinforcing that point about using both vertical and horizontal number lines, and again looking for them in the world around them. So just really taking an opportunity to think about what negative numbers are, where we use them in the real world, and just give them that base understanding. When we think about the calculations involving negative numbers, we're moving into third level, but we want them to have an understanding of what we mean by negative numbers, what they look like, how are they used. All of that depth of understanding comes first. Okay, just moving on, Yvonne. Thank you. So the activities that you're seeing in this slide come from packs which were created for Maths Week Scotland in 2020. Maths Week Scotland takes place every year at the end of September. This year it's the 26th of September to the 2nd of October 2022. And you can still access the material from 2020 and 2021 on the Maths Week Scotland website. Each year when we're putting these packs together, there is a recommendation that we are looking for activities that contain an element of outdoor learning. So really worthwhile looking at these packs for a wee bit of inspiration if you're looking for some ideas. Again, I can pop a link in the chat to the Maths Week Scotland website if that would be useful, but it's really just to give you again that starter for 10. And just finally for me, we're going to go and have a bit of a break shortly. More links. So the people who said earlier on in the chat that they were looking for some ideas and maybe at the very early start of their journey on outdoor learning, these are the ones that we've picked out that we think would be most beneficial to support you with your learning outdoor journey. The top left box is more kind of general support for learning outdoors. The one on the right is maybe more specific to numeracy and mathematics. There's also a Wakelet that's there at the bottom left-hand side, and again, more general support, but absolutely worthwhile visiting some of these, because some of the ideas will just give you a spark to move on. So definitely worthwhile having a look through some of these if you're planning some outdoor learning coming up. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some ideas for early first and second level. Please put into the chat any questions or comments. I've not checked the car park, so I'll look to see if there's anything in the car park. But I think what we're going to do now is we're going to stop for a bit of a 5-minute screen break. And then when we come back, we're going to look at some questioning approaches. So we'll come back together at 16:45, and that allows you time to catch your breath, maybe look at some of those websites, and we'll reconvene at 16:45.
Hello, Yvonne, are you okay to move on? Thank you. Okay, so what we're doing now for this part of the session is we're going to look at effective questioning approaches that can enhance learning, teaching and assessment in numeracy and maths. And we've got a document that goes along with this that I've uploaded to the Padlet and we'll also share the link to later on as well. But just before we go any further, what I would like to think about is, or what I would like you to think about is take a moment just to think about what are some of the features of effective questioning. So what do you think makes your questioning strong and effective? So any thoughts you can, stick them in the chat or make a wee note of them or whatever you feel comfortable with. Just give you a few moments to do that. Open, thank you. Any others? And don't worry if your brain's scrambled at this time of night and you're kind of like, I don't know. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Thinking about why they're learning something, yeah. How, what do you think? Questions that prompt deep thinking. Yep. Yeah, I think opening up the discussion is a really key point as well. Multiple access points, that sort of thing. So I think we'll just move on now. I mean, already you've noted some effective features of questioning, and we've just pulled together some of them on the slide here. That this isn't all of them, it isn't all the effective features of questioning, but it is some of them. And really, the kind of key things that we want you to take away is that effective questioning takes place throughout the lesson, not just at the beginning, but completely throughout. You really need to make sure that you plan your questioning, because sometimes when we're in the midst of a lesson, it's difficult to think of appropriate questions when you're trying to kind of behaviour manage and all sort of things. So it is a good idea to plan in some key questions throughout your lesson. Not every single question you're going to ask, but just some really good deep thinking questions that you can use within your lesson as well. What we need to remember is that different types of questions will serve different purposes. So it's really important to think about the purpose of the type of question that you're asking and why are you asking it that way, and what do you hope to get from it as well. We also need to make sure that we're giving learners enough time to think about what the question's asking. So try not to take responses too quickly, which it can be very easy to do, and to follow up questions too quickly. I know I could be guilty of this, and when I was in the classroom as well. Same things. Set a question, and then the silence was uncomfortable, so you'd start saying things like. You'd start adding in other questions and adding bits to it. So you need to just be really mindful that we're not that you're not bombarding them with questions is the point I'm trying to get to there. Also try not to take responses too quickly. If you take a response too quickly, you're not giving others who take a wee bit longer with their thinking to really access that question. So really actually they just start to tune out and think, well, there's no point, somebody else will get that. Give them all thinking time, give them time to discuss with a partner if that's effective for your learners, just kind of judge it. But the key thing is providing that wait time. And it is difficult, and sometimes 2 or 3 seconds or 5 seconds can feel like an eternity. So what you need to make sure is that you're I used to start by counting in my head, and then as time went on, I got better at it. It feels like an uncomfortable silence, and that's why we're uncomfortable with it. And even in these sessions, Maria, Yvonne and I, we try to leave time, and it is difficult because you just feel that you're kind of sitting there, but it's so important, and it really is giving everybody a kind of chance to access it too. So I'm going to hand back to Maria just for a couple of slides and then back to me again after that.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So I suppose we're taking a big focus tonight on questioning, and we have done actually through all the sessions, but tonight quite explicitly. And I suppose it's just about answering why we're doing that. And there's 2 reasons. One, they're embedded in our experiences and outcomes and our wider guidance. But when we think about those lifelong skills that we want to develop in our young people, questioning absolutely sits at the heart of it. And if we're thinking about, if we ask the question, which we have done in other audiences, what do we want for our young learners, and what are those skills that will see them through into their adulthood? We really want young people who can think mathematically or who are sophisticated thinkers, who look for patterns and problem solve. So it's up to us to empower our young people as those mathematical thinkers. And when we think, and again, we've asked this question without showing it, what do we think the 8 skills are that are embedded within our experiences and outcomes and our benchmarks? Quite often the responses are it's addition and it's subtraction, or it's multiplication, and it's not. It's the skills that you're seeing in front of you just now. And again, it's thinking about how we can effectively develop and extend these skills. They can be developed through the careful planning of the activities that we provide. Again, the questions that we ask and the range of assessment opportunities that we provide for our learners. They should encourage learners to think deeply about the concepts, going beyond just remembering and going beyond that recall of knowledge, but encouraging them to explain their thinking, to really interpret questions, to share and learn from each other, deepening that understanding as they're doing it. And again, as learners go through the Curriculum for Excellence levels, it's about increasing the sophistication and independence in their ability to demonstrate and link and transfer and apply all these skills in a range of increasingly more challenging contexts. So we will go over so there's a guide that Jacqueline's about to go over with you, and some of the activities and ideas that we've got in this guide will absolutely help develop and strengthen some of these skills. So on the next slide, this is what the guide looks like. And just a wee bit before I pass on to Jacqueline about why we put this together and what the purpose of this guide is. The guide explores different types of questioning approaches, and we've had some of them in the chat already today, which is good. We're thinking, what does that look like in a numeracy and maths focus in particular? The guide explains what they are. It provides examples and also highlights what assessment opportunities each approach might provide. It also includes some collaborative tasks that can be used within staff or departments, but again, we'll talk a wee bit about that. But the key message is that questioning should be a key part of assessment approaches and embedded within lessons, also incorporated into planning. And we've mentioned that importance of planning quite a few times today. So the guide provides examples of the types of questions that could be embedded in planning, learning, teaching and assessment within numeracy and maths, but it also highlights the specific assessment opportunities. We're not, it's not saying that this is the be all and the end all, or that indeed that you use them all at the one time. Different approaches can be used at different times depending on the learners you're working with, etc. And again, the questioning in numeracy and maths is not limited to the examples. It's recommended that you use these examples, discuss them and build on them through collaborative dialogue so that we know that the needs of those individual learners have been met. So I'm going to pass you on to Jacqueline. We will provide a link to this. There is a link, I think, already in the Padlet. But I'm going to pass back to Jacqueline just to go over some of the examples with you. But that just gives a bit of an idea of what the guide is and why it was put together.
Thanks, Maria. I've also put the link in the chat just for anybody that wants to open it and have a wee nosy. But the images that Maria put up there kind of capture the essence of it. There's just a few extra bits in it there as well. When we designed that guide, we wanted to keep it really simple, really practical. Examples that you could try out yourself and then expand on them. So it is a really practical guide that's easy to access, and it is worth sharing even with colleagues around you if they've not seen it as well. So you've seen this slide before. We've used this in previous presentations, but we just thought, when we're talking about effective questioning, we couldn't really not include it. So we thought we would just put it in. We talked previously about the difference between open-ended and open-rooted questions. Open-ended questions, they provide opportunities for different strategies to be used and for different possible solutions to be found to a single question as well. Whereas open-rooted questions can provide opportunities for different strategies, but actually there's only one possible solution. So there are two different types of questions, and it is important to have a think about when you're creating your questions. Is this open-rooted or is it open-ended? And that's not to say that you should be doing one over the other. It's just be aware of it and, having a look at how you can adapt it to maybe be more open-rooted and open-ended when you are creating questions as well. We really do like open-ended questions for differentiation because they allow multiple entry points. I know that people have asked about differentiation in the past, so what we've tried to do is just embed examples of how you can do this. And you can use a differentiated approach. What I would say is that the types of questions that we're looking at over the next few slides, they are all very good for a differentiated approach, and hopefully you'll see, the reasons for that being that you can access them from different viewpoints. They are more accessible. All learners can be a part of it, but they'll access them in different ways, and what the discussion will be different with different learners as well. I'll just move on to the next one actually. Thank you, Yvonne. So this slide, we've used this slide before. We used it in the developing a problem solving approach webinar, but we just thought it would be quite useful to highlight again when we're talking about questioning tonight. We talked about open-ended questions. So just having a wee look at this slide, I'm just going to give you a moment to read it. I know we have used it before, but just have a quick look and see how have they changed into open-ended. I'm not asking you to answer it or anything like that. Just have a wee look about how you can make a problem more open. Okay, I think we'll just move on because we have used that before. Somebody mentioned it earlier, I think, always, sometimes, never. It's an approach where learners are provided with mathematical statements and they have to decide whether they're always true, sometimes true, or never true. And then they should be asked to justify their thinking. So what I want you to do is have a wee go yourself. Pick any of the levels that you feel most comfortable with and just look at each of the statements within that level and just note down next to you whether each statement is always true, sometimes true, or never true. You don't need to put it in the chat because it'll get too complicated. We won't know which level people are talking about, but just take a moment, pick a level and work on that. I'm just going to move on because I'm just conscious of time as well. Obviously, it'd be better if we had a bit more time. When you're looking at those always, sometimes, never questions, if I was doing this with learners in a class and if I had more time with you, I would ask you to prove what you've said. So why is it always true? Why is it never true? But you can also extend that even further by asking them, a statement that they've said is sometimes true. Well, how could we change something within that statement to make it always true? Or how can we change it to make it never true? So that they're actually exploring the concept that they're looking at. They've just got more time to, really pick it apart than just mechanically answering questions all the time. So, but the key with this is time. And I know that sometimes we feel under pressure, but actually giving time to something like this really, it provides so many benefits, and it really helps to also develop that mathematical reasoning as well. So in this type of example, so this is here is the answer, what is the question? Some of you might have used this before. They're basically provided with an answer to an unknown question, and it could be anything really. It could be a number, a calculation, an object, or an image. So we've given you some examples of what this could be here. This is purely examples. There's almost anything else you could use as well. Whatever you're teaching, in the next few days, maybe you could try and, use that concept and use this approach. It's something you can do quite quickly, quite easily. So you give them the answer, and then they have to come up with the questions. And again, this leads to that natural differentiation because they'll create questions that are at their level of mathematical understanding. And what I want you to do, just now is pick one of these. So you can pick 5, you can pick £1, you can pick 1.25 metres or 75%. And I want you to come up with a question that could mean that that's the answer. Could be that one of these is the answer. So stick it in the chat if you want. I think we'll be able to work out which one you're talking about by the question, hopefully. Again, if our brains aren't quite working because it's the end of the day. But pick one of these and create a question for one of them. Thank you, Rowena. £20 take away £19. 2 plus 3, so we've got 5 and the £1 here. I would let you continue to put things in. Maybe you've written some on your note paper as well. I've got more coming in here as well. So yeah, thank you. What you can continue to do is, right, you've got a question, what other questions could you create? So you're just kind of extending them. You could just have one image or item up on the board or in front of them, or you could have a few like this. Maybe four's too many. This was just to show you kind of different levels, and then learners can choose which one they go into. And if you're kind of suspicious that some of them are doing ones that are too easy or too challenging for them, then you could say to them, well, that's brilliant. Why don't you have a go at that one? Why don't you have a go at that one? And that sort of thing. What we like about this as well is it can kind of change that mindset that in maths there's always only one answer. I suppose in this case that is the answer, but it's just about that creativity, and there's lots of different approaches that can be used. So this just encourages that more wider thinking as well, and to be more flexible in what they're thinking. You could also extend this by adding in some extra conditions, such as, can you think of another question that would give the same answer? Can you think of a more challenging question that would give this answer? Or could you think of a question that involves multiplication or division or fractions that would give this answer, and so on? You just kind of need to judge that on your learners, and that will change in every different context. So just judge that, but it's just to give you an example of what we could do. On the next slide, we've got some examples of some of the answers that learners might give you. We've seen some in the chat already, which is great. What I wanted to kind of show this is because to begin with, learners will give you the easier questions. So for 5, 4 plus 1, but actually we're trying to get them to extend themselves. And great to see in the chat there that we've got somebody trying to put that into a worded problem as well, or into context. So these are just some examples, but it shows you the different different access points that learners will access this. Some will only be able to use the straightforward easier calculations, whereas some will be able to extend that, and that's up to you to push them a wee bit further as well. But I think it's just quite an easy one. It doesn't take too much prep time, but actually you can get a lot out of it as well. So on this next slide, it's a kind of similar activity. What else do you know? And this time the learners are provided with a mathematical representation. So again, it could be anything really, a number, calculation, an object or an image. And they're asked to note down what they know about it. And you can keep saying to them, because initially some learners will just write down one thing, but you can keep saying, well, what else do you know? What else do you know? How many things can you tell me about this item, and so on? And you just keep pushing them till, well, again, you judge it on your learners as well. So learners might create questions about it, or they might provide some facts about what they see. So again, just to give you a wee turn of this, pick one of the images on the screen, and I want you to tell me what you know about it. And again, we'll be able to judge it based on what you've written, I'm pretty sure. So I'll give you a few moments to do that. I think there's a bit of a delay in my chat because it shows like nothing, and then all of a sudden loads come in. Or maybe it just takes that one person to be brave and everybody else follows. Thanks, Yvonne. There's someone else in there as well. Cuboid. It's got primary colours. It's got 6 foot. Great. So you've got some facts there. Great. Great. And there's different ways you can do this. They can display it as, the kind of spider diagrams where they put the object in the middle and they draw lots of things around it, saying, all the things they know. But again, the key thing is just it's about to celebrate their platinum jubilee. And then you will get things that are not quite mathematical, but that's okay. Talk about them. It's absolutely fine. Why is the queen on the coins? It's interesting to have that conversation as well. It's real life. So what I would say is that sometimes you might need to scaffold this or model this to begin with, because they might feel a wee bit apprehensive about giving their ideas. And it's just like everything else we've talked about over the last block of sessions, is that these new approaches can be a wee bit nerve-wracking for some to begin with, and it takes them a bit of time to get warmed up. So it's worth trying things a few times, and then just kind of, you'll see it start to progress as time goes on. Excuse me. And so I've said about the modelling, talking about the extension as well. So if you look at the egg box, some learners might start with it's an egg box. Some might say it's an egg box with 7 buttons, or some might say the egg box has an odd number of buttons, and then progressing on to, if you add 4 and 3, you get 7, and so on. And there's lots of other possibilities with that. And actually, everyone's going to show us the next slide of some examples of how that might look. So we didn't do all of them purely because we didn't have enough room. But that was the kind of spider diagram model I was talking about, where you've got the object in the middle and you're making offshoots. And if you look at the 3/4 one, you can see there's lots of different things in there, and it's not limited to them. And it depends what stage your learners are at, because some will not be ready to convert to decimal fractions, and that's okay. It's what's right for your learners, and that's what the beauty of this approach is. And if you look at the egg box, this is one that actually Maria had said that we should really add in, and she was right, because the numbers on the left hand side, where we've got 7 = 1 and 1 adds 6, we tend not to look at calculations in that way, but we should be having that looking at different ways of laying out calculations, because 7 = 1 + 6 is correct. We would just typically look at 1 + 6 = 7, but we're limiting the understanding of learners if we're only showing them calculations laid out in a particular way. So that's why we've really showed you all the different ways that they could do that there. So this slide here, this is within the document, the guidance document that the effective questioning one, and it's just really some points to consider about your own questioning, your own use of questioning. We kind of recommend that this is used collaboratively with, whether that's at staff meetings. We know that you maybe don't have control over that, but it doesn't have to be. It can be self-reflection. So you just have a look at it, think about these questions and think about your own approaches and what you're doing well, what maybe could you work a wee bit more on. So I'll just give you a moment to read through the questions and then think about your own next steps in embedding these approaches into your lessons. If there's anything that you think you would like to try or change, feel free to post it in the chat as well. Okay, you'll have access to these slides, so you can go back to this sometimes when it's 7:10. 7:10. I'm jumping ahead here. 5:10 on a Wednesday. Towards the end of term, it does get quite hard to think about things, so we'll move on to the next bit. We are coming to the end of all of these sessions. This was session 8 of 9, and the next one is the last one. I actually can't believe it. It feels like 5 minutes ago these started. I'm sure you're feeling the same about your teaching year, even though you feel really tired and it's felt really long at the same time. So the next session is Ideas of Chance and Uncertainty. I'll give you the code to register for that. We're also going to give you time to just, think about some final reflections in relation to the course, and we will also put out the full course evaluation at the next session. However, we're going to give it out tonight as well, so that people have got more time to think about it and go away and complete it. We haven't given out an evaluation at the end of every session because we just felt it was total overkill. We didn't want to, death by evaluation. We know that you're filling out evaluations for almost everything else that you're attending as well. So that's why we are asking everybody to complete this, because it is only the one evaluation at the end, although we did do a mid one as well. But hopefully you can just take time. It will probably take you about 10 minutes to get through it. So it's just pick a time where you've got 10 minutes between now and the beginning of June, and if you could work through that would be great. It just really helps us. We are looking at how we're going to run this next year. We need to look at the kind of approaches we can do to make this a bit more sustainable. So any feedback is welcome. What you really like, what's worked really well, what you think could improve it, that sort of thing would be really, really useful. So the link is in the chat. You can scan that, or I'll also send it out by email as well. So you will get bombarded with opportunities to complete the evaluation, and I make no apologies for that. The next slide is the link to the next session. So Ideas of Chance and Uncertainty. It's quite a fun one. We were looking at that the other day. There's lots of nice practical activities. It's a bit more light-hearted. It's something that you can maybe take away. It's probably something that'd be quite nice for the end of term to use with your learners as well. So we would love to see you there, and we'll put the link in the chat. I'm just getting the link just now. Hold on. I'm never very good at this copying and pasting and all sorts when I'm also talking. Okay, that's the link. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you've got it in there, Zoe, you're ahead of me. So yeah, please register for this. It is actually only in 2 weeks. I can't believe it. So if you could register for that as soon as possible so that we know that you're able to come along to that. And then there are some regional drop-ins. We know these haven't been hugely highly attended, and we know there's various different reasons for that, and that's absolutely fine. But if you are wanting to come along, we will still be there. So even if you just want to talk about the course, or you want to talk about how you can use something in your own setting, or maybe you're coming on to teach something, or maybe you'll know your stage for next year and you're thinking, I don't know what to do with that stage when it comes to numeracy and maths, come along, we'll be there. We're happy to talk you through absolutely anything. It's drop in, drop out. You can stay for 5 minutes. You can stay for no minutes, or you can stay as long as you want. But it's just there as an extra kind of crutch for you. But they are optional. But if you'd like to come along, they're there. So we can see the next one for Forth Valley and West Lothian is the 13th of June. The Northern Alliance is the 25th of May, which is next week. South East is the 14th of June. We do appreciate these are getting late into the term, but it might be a good place to just stop and take note. The Southwest ones are finished. The Tayside one is the 26th of May, which is also next week, and the West Partnership one is the 14th of June. So you can see the list of the authorities. So if you're not sure which RIC you belong to, which region, then that's there. But it's in the presentation that you can go back and have a wee look. And Yvonne has put a nice helpful video, linked to a video on that, on how to access these teams. So we're actually finishing really early tonight, which is great. I'm sure you will be very grateful. The weather is quite nice here, so it's nice to maybe get a bit of fresh air or finish off whatever you need to do in relation to work and all that. So thank you for coming along. Please register for the next session, and we will see you on the 1st of June.